for the sake of time, we are going to officially start the Gateway series here. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Gateway Professional Development series. This came together between the Asian Leaders Alliance, NAP, and the Asian Business League last year, and we're proud to say that we've been continuing this since last March, April. We've been able to provide a lot of our members, friends, and family programs about, leadership, self-development, how to better yourself, and of course, ultimately make ourselves into a much better, stronger individual that can contribute to your workplace as a professional or within the organization that you do work. I'm Victor Shin. I'm president and chairman board of the Asian Business League. We have Ramon from the Asian Leaders Alliance. We have John Folk from NAP. We have Jimmy Wah from Asian Leaders Alliance. And we know that many other board members and individuals who are part of these organizations will be logging on here shortly. But today, we're bringing to you a very special speaker like we have in the previous months. I'm proud to say that I do work with Connie Joe, who's going to be talking about corporate social responsibility. We work together at Bank of the West, and I'm in the government banking division, and we do work and engage with her team closely when we deal with governments and what the bank is doing to help save the world here. But Connie is a Bay Area native from Danville, married, a couple children, local UC Berkeley grad, go Bears. And, she's been focusing on our corporate social responsibility strategies and, and of course, just bettering the communities and the bank. Previously, she worked at JP Morgan Chase and also at Blackrock. And then she also spent 10 years as a management consultant with Accenture. But I'm very excited to have her here. And of course, it's always a learning experience for me all the time. But I want to go over some housekeeping rules. If you do have any questions, you can go ahead and type it into the chat room. Connie's going to be doing her presentation, and then when that's concluded, we will do the Q&A, and then afterwards we do our virtual networking session. So we hope all of you will be able to stay and interact with one another. With that being said, Connie, I'm going to hand this over to you now.
Great. Let's hope I can get my technology to work. I'm going to share my screen, and then hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Victor. I am really excited to be able to share and talk to you about a topic that I'm really passionate about, corporate social responsibility. And I put a catchy title, but I don't believe it's trite. And I really believe this is a way for us to be a modern day superhero and save the world. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what is corporate social responsibility, why CSR is a priority now and it's trending, and switch gears a little bit and say, what is your role in all of this? So let's get started. So let's start with corporate social responsibility and the definition of it. Corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short, is a self-regulating business model that helps companies and a business be socially and environmentally accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and the public. And oftentimes when you hear CSR, you're also going to hear another three-letter acronym, ESG. And what that stands for is environmental, social, and corporate governance. And oftentimes people use these two interchangeably. The way I differentiate them is that corporate ESG is how a corporate social responsibility program measures its sustainability and societal impact. So if you take a look on this slide, these environment, social, and governance, they're really the three central factors which companies are going to say, I'm going to have an impact. And then there's different categories down within environmental. And depending on the company and what's material to them, they're going to try to focus on, for example, if you're a textile company, you're really going to care about your impact to water efficiency and biodiversity, because creating a garment takes a lot of water. If you're a company that has a lot of people, you may be more interested in social aspects, for example, health and safety and human rights. And many companies already, especially if you're public, are interested in governance, right? Business ethics, compliance, board independence. So just know between CSR and ESG, these are terms that we use to talk about corporate social responsibility, and they are oftentimes used interchangeably. But that is a lot of jargon, right? And I like to simplify what CSR is to simply who the company is, what they do, what they believe in, and how they do their business. So as Victor mentioned, I work at Bank of the West. We both work at Bank of the West. We are a bank, and we offer savings, we offer deposits and loans. And what we believe in is that we're a fundamentally different bank. And the reason we believe that is how we do our business. We are sustainable. We have the strongest environmental stance of any major US bank, and that is because of what we don't finance. We are also diverse. Our CEO, Nandita Bankshi, is a woman of color, and she represents only 6% of the bank CEOs globally. And then our impact is also global. As part of BNP Paribas, we're a subsidiary of a big French bank. The impact of our sustainable policies are really felt throughout 68 countries and worldwide. So that's our CSR program in a nutshell. It's not really complicated, but it is what we believe in. So you may be thinking, wait, isn't the business of business to make money? And that is really true. For a very long time, there was only one single bottom line that a business was measuring, and that was profit, right? But over time, businesses have started to add different aspects of things that they want to measure. They've added people, their impact to their society and the community around them, and also the impact of their planet, so their environmental performance, so that a business is actually measuring not only profit, but their impact on society and the environment. And this is what is known as the triple bottom line in CSR. And it's become so common, actually, that this year, the Influential Business Roundtable updated their definition of what a company purpose is from just a company should be maximizing shareholder value to, quote, companies should serve not only their shareholders, but also deliver value to their customers, invest in employees, deal fairly with suppliers, and support the communities in which they operate. So you can see the complexity of what a company should be doing has incorporated different aspects beyond profit. And what we're seeing now is that over 90% of the S&P 500 companies have sustainability reports. And that has actually exploded in the last 8 years, it's quadrupled. And companies put a lot of effort and care into trying to tell you what their corporate social responsibilities are about, what their mission are and their purpose, and the ESG metrics in which they're measuring their commitments and seeing and sharing with you what their progress is. So obviously, having a CSR program is going to bring a company value. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on looking at each of the bottom lines and see what having a good CSR program delivers to companies, starting with profit. So according to a 2020 Zeno study, if your brand has strong purpose, a customer is 4 times more likely to purchase your product, 4 times more likely to trust your company, and 6 times more likely to protect your company in case there's any sort of public mishap. So immediately from these results, you can see the value that having a strong purpose and mission and CSR program is going to deliver to your brand in terms of increasing its perception, its awareness, and value. And when I think about this and the results of this, the first company that comes to mind that exhibits this brand lift is Patagonia. And many of you guys probably know they're a outdoor retailer. They have outdoor garments and backpacks. And they were really one of the first to lead with a strong purpose of sustainability. And they did some research and they realized that hyper-consumerism was actually really bad for the planet. And they decided in 2011 that they were going to run a campaign that said, please, loyal customers, don't buy any more of our gear. It's actually really bad for the planet. And if something's broken, bring it back and we'll try to fix it. And that's pretty bold for a retail company, right? Because the only way they're making money is if their customers are actually going out and buying their gear. But what it did was it solidified to their customers that they really believed in their purpose and that they were transparent and that they were honest about their intentions. And that very same year in 2011, their revenues actually rose by 30%. So having a strong purpose can really elevate your brand, which is going to deliver a big lift to your bottom line of profit. In addition, having companies who are socially responsible can also charge premium pricing and help brand differentiation. Studies have shown that consumers, 55% of consumers are willing to pay more for products from socially responsible companies. And this is even higher and more true with our younger generation, our millennials and Gen Z. Many studies have shown that they are very willing to pay for products that align with their values. Now, unfortunately, I don't belong in any of those generations anymore. I wish I did. But I believe that this rings true to me because I know that whenever I need to go and buy a new pair of pants or shorts or something like that, the first company that I'm going to check out is Athleta. And the reason is because that company checks off two things for me, two boxes. The first is that they're sustainable. Many of their clothing is made out of recycled material or sustainable fabrics or sustainable process. And the second is that their mission is to ignite the possibilities of all women. So immediately, those are two things that align with my values. And even though I know that possibly I could probably buy a pair of shorts that are cheaper somewhere else, I'm happy to pay that premium because I know where my money is going. So hopefully you can see why having a strong brand, a strong CSR program can support your brand and really elevate the profit bottom line. So moving on to people, and arguably for a company, your employees are really your best asset. And having a good, strong CSR program helps to recruit and to retain your employees or your future employees. So according to a 2017 Conn communication study, they asked some people whether they consider CSR in deciding where to work. And resoundingly, 80% of millennials said, yes, CSR is a big factor in when I decide whether or not to work for a company or not, 80%. And as the respondents' age goes up, that number comes down, but still the US average is close to 60%. So when it comes to winning the war on talent, having a CSR program is a major factor. And in some industries that are really short on talent, and really like for coders, for example, having a strong CSR program is potentially going to land that talent in your company. So now that you have them in the door, similarly, they asked, would you be more loyal to a company with a CSR program? And these numbers are even higher. 83% of millennials said, yes, I'm willing to be loyal. And having a strong CSR program is going to keep me more engaged, is going to keep me more happy. And the US average is even higher here, it's 70%. So having a CSR program is really important in terms of for your employees. They are going to look at that. But your employees are not the only one who care about CSR in your community. Your investors and shareholders also care about ESG. A company's ESG metrics, and oftentimes you're going to hear that called as non-financial data, is really becoming just as important as financial metrics. On the top graph, I shared with you just a breakdown of the ESG proposals in this 2021 proxy season. And so you can see it's actually spread out, like the categories are spread out across the E and the S and the G category. And you would think that it's all environmental, but people care about political activity, board diversity, and human rights. So oftentimes we focus about climate change, but there are other things that a sustainability report or corporate social responsibility addresses as well. But probably the most famous thing that happened for proxy action was that there was a company, engine number one, and they own 0.02% of ExxonMobil. But they were able to get together with some of the largest institutional investors. And what they did was they ousted 2 board members of ExxonMobil who they believed were not advancing climate change fast enough, and they replaced them with their 2 board members. So that was a huge shock to the community, the investment community, right? ExxonMobil, their board members don't change very often, and certainly not, from a small activist community like company. But it was a big alarm bell to everyone that your ESG metrics matter. And Blackrock, which is the largest asset management company in the world, has also signaled to the world. Larry Fink sent out an email to his annual letter to his investors saying there is no more important topic than climate change to our clients, and they are starting to vote using their power along the E, S, and G spaces across using their leverage to advance their own corporate social responsibility. So investors and shareholders care about ESG. And not surprisingly, so does the regulators, the government. And if there's anything you take away from this slide, ESG regulation is coming. It's coming to the US. And it's already been in the EU. And you can see that chart. You can see that they've started a lot earlier than us. But the Biden administration has really put climate change in the forefront of their administration priorities. And we expect ESG regulation to come, starting with, by the end of this year, we expect the SEC to be putting out some draft language about the ESG data metrics that all public companies are going to have to start to disclose. And the reason for that, obviously, is that climate risk is real, and governments understand that, and they need companies to disclose what type of exposures they have and where their ESG metrics are. All right, so we talked a little bit about the community as well, and your employees, your investors, and the government are expecting companies to disclose and track and measure their ESG impact. Moving on to the third and last bottom line, the environment. Companies care about the environment, like not only their impact, but the impact of the environment that they're working in. And the reason is because, just like all of us, all companies are starting to feel actual loss from climate change. You can see on the top graph here, just in 2020 alone, over $268 billion were lost due to climate change. You have climate disasters such as fires, floods. Fires is something that we definitely know about in the Bay Area, but it's becoming a tangible thing. And companies also understand that resources are finite, and that if they don't act, it's going to have a real impact to their productivity and profitability. So what's happening is that many of the larger companies are starting to commit to reducing their carbon footprint. And on the bottom graph, I just show this to you, not because it looks really intimidating, but it's important to understand the language that's coming out. They're trying to measure their carbon output. And so they do that in different, like scope 1, 2, and 3. So the only thing you really need to know is that that's how like different categories. Scope 1 is related to a company's direct carbon output. Scope 2 and 3 are indirect. So for example, if you take a plane ride to go see a customer, that's considered to be indirect because it's not actually producing the product that you make. But companies know that they need to actually reduce their carbon footprint. And the other thing that companies are doing is really jumping on to the race to net zero. And you may be hearing these headlines as well. And what that means is that companies are uniting in the goal to limit the temperature of the earth from increasing no more than 1.5 degrees based on pre-industrial levels. And so I'll take a pause here, and you'll probably also hear Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees. These are things that you probably read a lot about. And what that actually just means is that when a bunch of governments and experts came together in 2015 in Paris, they agreed that, okay, we have to draw the line in the sand. And when we cross that line, we're going to have irreversible impact to the Earth's climate system. And what they decided was we don't want to go over 1.5 degrees Celsius. Some say 2 degrees. And what companies are saying is, in addition to reducing their scope, their carbon output, their scope 1, 2, and 3 that we just talked about, they're also going to commit to whatever they can't reduce, which is not ever going to be zero if you're producing anything, right? They're going to offset that through investments in wind, solar, or like planting trees, anything that's going to take carbon out of our atmosphere so that the impact of that company is actually going to be zero. And everybody's committing to get there by 2050. So this is actually really important because we need all companies to get on board to this race so that we can really limit the impact of climate change. Okay. So I'm going to take a break. I've talked a lot about companies and switch gears here because many of you guys are probably thinking, okay, that's what companies do and that's the value of CSR. What actually is my role in all of this? And the good news is that we all have a role, and because we're all customers, right, and consumers, and the role that we play is really important. Michael Porter, who is a Harvard Business School professor, he did a really great TEDx talk, and he basically said, he looked around and he basically said, he did studies and said, there is no amount of philanthropy or grants dollars that is going to actually solve all of society's problems. But where he did see promise was when businesses are self-selecting, right, the CSR programs to create solutions to society's problems. And what he said was, what we need to do is change, and this is where we come in, right, redefine the customer need so that we expect businesses to be creating solutions to society problems, and we are also rewarding them. And when that happens, when you get that lovely Venn diagram and overlap, we create shared value. And that shared value can infinitely scale to address all of the problems in society because it's just this beautiful virtuous cycle. So where you come in is redefining that customer need. And then you can do that through exercising your everyday superhero powers. And many of you might be surprised, but you can really make a change by acting and helping to save the world. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. So first, you can act with your wallet. Purchase with your values. You should ask yourself, does the company that you buy from align with your environmental and social values? Remember we said that like many companies are actually publishing their sustainability reports? Well, go and read them. They put so much effort into sharing all the good information that they're doing, and be a conscious consumer. And when you find a company that you think is just doing awesome things, amplify them. That is where this rewarding comes. Reward the companies that are creating solutions for our communities so that we can continue to build this shared value between businesses and consumers. If you reward them, more businesses are going to continue to build those solutions and really make an impact. And for those that we've identified that aren't doing what we think they should be doing, communicate what needs to change. Tell the companies which ESG areas they need to work on to get your business. Sometimes businesses, especially the more smaller ones, need that feedback and push to help companies to see the value in making that transition. This is a great way to use social media for good. The other way you can act is with your talent. We talked about how companies develop CSR programs to attract new employees. Well, all of us have our talent, right? We can decide who we work for. And next time you're in that decision place, make sure you understand your company's mission and CSR program and purpose. And I promise you that if it doesn't align with your vision, your own personal values, chances are the culture of that company you're planning to join isn't going to be a great fit. The other thing you can do is volunteer your talent. Use your skills to benefit nonprofits. Many of you guys, are supporting nonprofits already. But at companies, our company, for example, we can get paid to go and volunteer, which is amazing, right? And we also have a dollar for dollar match for donations that our company will do. Many companies do that. But the one thing that I would encourage all of you guys to participate in is resource groups. Victor and I were just talking about the resource groups that we participate in, but maybe in the past they haven't had a lot of teeth, but nowadays, as I mentioned, many companies have to report on their non-financial data, especially in the social area. They have to show like the actions that they're making to make progress in some of the social areas. So I've seen resource groups be able to make changes in pay equity or even executive diversity or board diversity. So resources groups have a lot of teeth. And again, it's because this non-financial data is starting to become really important. People are starting to ask those questions when they decide whether or not to invest in a company or not. So if you don't have a resource group, think about starting one. And that leads me to my last point here is be the source of change, right? Everybody here has something within their span of control that they can change. So if you're, for example, a product manager, you're able to take a look and see, is there just one place that you can make a change to make your product more sustainable? If you deal with vendors or suppliers, advocate for sustainable and diverse suppliers. And it doesn't even have to be a really big move. You can just start small. I mean, start a recycling program. There are so many things that we can do. Don't wait for somebody to do it. Be the source of change because we really need everybody to act. And lastly, act with your investments. Do you know where your investments are like who your investments are supporting? Many of you, including myself, like if I have any savings from my 401k, the first thing I look when I go to invest it is return, right? I like what's the 5-year return? What's the 10-year return? But one thing you may not be thinking about and should start thinking about is where does your hard-earned money go? Does it go into companies that are supporting things that you may not be proud to be associated with? So make sure you understand, what your funds are supporting. And I urge everyone to evaluate investing into an ESG fund. There are so many of them. In fact, Morningstar said that in 2025, over a third of asset under management is going to be in ESG funds. And they have so many different purposes. For example, like you can invest in an ESG fund that is totally free of fossil fuel companies, for example. And the good news is that funds with an ESG purpose have been shown to have equal or higher rates of returns. So you're really not losing out on anything. And then lastly, I urge you guys to know your financial institution. When you deposit money into your bank, basically what a bank does is take that money and then we loan it out to different companies. But who are they loaning it out to? It may be to companies you're not aligned with your environmental or more, and even more importantly, maybe your social values. So know your financial institution as well. So in summary, I hope that you guys have had a chance to learn about what corporate social responsibility is, understand why it's such a hot topic, why like so many companies are developing programs, and the value that they get from the triple bottom line and for profit, people, and the planet. And I hope that you have taken at least one action item to use and activate your superpowers to help save the world. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you listening to my talk.
Connie, thank you so much. This is more than a fascinating topic. It's a relevant, true, living, breathing discussion, and many organizations are starting to align their values with the people that they serve, the communities that they sell to, and also now people who are looking for jobs or careers are looking for those values within those organizations where they can feel that they're a part of something different, making that change. And you nailed it earlier on the old business method and model about corporate social responsibility, and was a debate for a long time was, what was the responsibility of a corporation or an organization? And a long time ago, meaning just probably a decade ago, it was maximizing profits. But that discussion has changed over time now. It's more than maximizing profits. It's looking at the impact and the footprint that your organization can make within the communities, with the people buying from them, and then ultimately their employees. And aligning those values have been a key. I want to say a business strategy, and not only attracting talent, but also retaining talent, and and showcasing what you're doing, because people are looking for that change. They're looking for something to believe in. And, this is a conversation and a topic and an action item that's evolving more and more. And it's great to see, because we are at a point in the world where we do have to look at our sustainability. We have to be, in many ways, the champions, the superheroes, the stewards, right? To try and save the world for our generation, our generation, meaning us and our children and our children's children. And, what are we going to leave behind, and what's our legacy? And so, I know we're fortunate enough to work for an organization that touts this. A lot of our business units do live and breathe with this, and especially, my group, the government banking group, where we do have to talk to our constituents, the states and counties and cities, because they're looking out for their constituents, and they're looking for organizations that line up their values. So this is really an exciting talk, but it's an important talk, and we need more of this. And hopefully, everybody here can, feel empowered, or at least a little bit more knowledgeable about this area, to go back to your organizations, to look at their CSR guidelines and program. What is your organization doing? I know there's been a couple topics, or a couple chat topics coming up. Salesforce, of course, is very big in the CSR range. EA also, a lot of organizations within the Bay Area, that's on their forefront, on their, on their mission and strategy. And it's good to see that, that they're doing this. With that being said, we do have some questions for you, Connie. One of the questions is, what is the criteria for companies to have to report on ESG? Is it the number of employees, revenue? So basically, are there any parameters for, criteria as reporting, or, just maybe methods for organizations, to, delve in the world of ESG?
Yeah. And I would say that reporting is one of those spaces for CSR that isn't very organized yet, and it's getting organized because regulators are demanding that. But yeah, anybody can report on their sustainability and their corporate social responsibility. it's all like, you know, one of the things that I wanted to underline was that it's self-regulating at the moment, right? So it's completely optional for companies to participate. But, you know, because it's becoming the norm, you know, most of the largest, you know, like I said, 90% of the S&P 500, and I think I saw like close to like, you know, even the S&P 1200, it's a high percentage of people that are reporting sustainability reports. But reporting itself in CSR is very disjointed because there's tons of different methodologies. There's SASB, there's TCFD, it's like the alphabet soup of CSR. But I think we're getting to the point where governments, especially the US government, is realizing that they have to put out standards to really talk about, and when we talk about this, we're talking about like carbon footprint, right? How do you measure that? You know, how, like, and how do we make sure that, you know, like this measurement is apples to apples, you know, to across different companies. And then I know that on the SEC level, they are thinking they're for public companies, they're going to probably disclose, you're going to have to disclose board diversity, and some other more on the S side as well. And the governance side obviously was already well regulated by the SEC. So to answer that question, there's really no hard and fast rule. And that's kind of the problem actually, because people are having trouble figuring out, you know, okay, you say you're sustainable, so does 500 other companies. How do I evaluate what, you know, which company is actually truly sustainable? And some of those methodologies are kind of converging right now, I think.
No, that's great. The next question, you probably just answered it, but the question basically states, what about for manufacturing outside of the US and if outsourced or contracted? And it sounds like you mentioned that there really isn't maybe a unified way to do it yet on the reporting or maybe managing that, but any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, supply chain, so like we talked about like scope 1, 2, and 3, right? So your supply chain is an indirect, you know, impact to your carbon footprint. And so it depends, and again, it's optional, right? But for companies that have more mature CSR programs, they are not measuring not only like what the carbon footprint and environmental impact is to, you know, things that they produce, right? So if you're Apple, when you're accounting for your scope 2 and 3, you're looking all the way down to the supply chain, down to the parts, and what that carbon footprint is. So maybe it's not as popular to do, say, in Asia, for example, but if you're a company in the US or like in the EU, for example, and you purchase and have a supplier that's in Asia or somewhere offshore, you still need to account for that. And, you know, again, it goes back to like the alphabet soup about how you do it. But, you know, true corporate social responsibility programs have to measure all scopes. Like, for example, in banking, you know, we don't actually produce a product, right? We're deposits, loans, you know, and besides the fact that we have lots of branches and, you know, those burn fossil fuels, like for energy, you know, for example, we don't really produce anything, you know, paper statements, but the bulk of our carbon footprint output has to do with financed carbon emissions. So like, for example, I finance a company that manufactures textiles, for example. Well, banks have to actually try to account for what's the carbon footprint of that loan, right? I gave them $500,000 to make a garment, but I have some indirect exposure, right, to because I gave them that loan and gave them like capital to actually go and make that product, which is going to release some carbon into to our environment. So there are standards depending on how you report for supply chain.
No. And you know, it sounds like at the end of the day, especially if you're if you want to be an organization that wants to be diverse and inclusive and really make a change, you should start at least, looking at your own internal policies of who you do business with, right? Especially supply chains and people you hire, or, your position and stance, because now, as consumers, right, where we're looking for organizations, like mentioned earlier, that aligns with our values and what we believe in. Is it recycled goods? If you go to Starbucks, are they using recycled cups? Or if you're going to a restaurant, are they using, recycled plastics? City and County of San Francisco banned plastic bottle usage, right? That's what people are looking for. And I think if you're an organization that don't align to that, or won't align to that, eventually, you're going to probably suffer on the bottom line down the line. Eventually.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about environmental impact, but there's companies that are doing great things socially as well, right? Somebody mentioned Salesforce. Salesforce is a great example of, they have Mark Benioff is really leading, I think he calls it stakeholder capitalism is what he calls it. And he said that everybody is a stakeholder, not just, the people that own shares in Salesforce. But, there are companies that are doing great things socially as well. Like Salesforce is one of them, right? But companies like Chobani is a great example of people who he decided to make his employees have equity in his company. He and also looking out to his community and hiring refugees, to integrate them into this country and give them a place to work. So, companies are doing great things, not just on the E space, but also on the S space. Lyft is another one, and so when I talk about being a conscious consumer, it's like, you need to know these things because, you may not, people are like, brands are starting to advertise that as a way to differentiate themselves, but they may not always say it. But there's great companies doing great things, and back to the whole shared value, we need to actually recognize them and reward them so that they're incented to keep doing it, right? Otherwise, we will not be able to scale and solve all the problems that we need to solve.
Yeah, in fact, every year they publish the top 10 corporations that do strong work in CSR, and you'll be surprised who you see up there. I mean, you'll see Disney, you see Lego, you see Mercedes-Benz up there, you see Sony. There's a lot of top Fortune, 100 companies out there. They're, doing a lot of social changes and making a lot of impacts and investments. Microsoft, just name some of the top organizations. Chevron, they're doing it. So it's great to see. The last question: would allowing work from home post-COVID count towards lowering carbon footprint because employees not commuting, right? We're not in the car as much.
Yeah, and actually that's really like our favorite question to ask is, because you set out these carbon footprint goals and then COVID happened and we're like, we magically did so wonderful without doing anything. But I think what we're trying to do is just reset and say, yes, of course, not commuting helps, right? Especially in the Bay Area, we have very long commutes, people getting cars, and being able to telecommute is great, for carbon footprints and a lot of companies are also reducing their office space as well. So they're able to save on that. So it is good. It is good. All of us, are getting that. But also remember though, you're now using more electricity at home. So it's not like it's netted out to zero. We are sending more emails that has a electric carbon footprint as well. So it's this game of net zero, and how do you add it up, and how do you know that you've achieved net zero? It's actually, one of the more intricate pieces of corporate social responsibility is the reporting and the accounting piece of it. But I think, yeah, definitely it's helped companies, but it's not very honest to say we hit our goals, by just simply COVID. And I think companies understand that. They're not just gonna be like, I magically made it, So there has been a question about resetting goals with the new normal of people not always being in the office and not commuting, with the knowledge that the impact, it's just been shifted to individuals' homes as opposed to like spent at an office.
No, that's true. And in fact, if all of us reflect back since March, when they first had the shelter in place, yes, we were not commuting, we were emitting less pollution into the air. But on the flip side, yes, I've noticed my electricity bill has gone up. Our to-go containers, right? Restaurants had to pivot. So there was a lot more to-go containers stacking up at the house. I noticed my recycling bin was increasing. Going shopping, right? People were stocking up on more toilet paper and paper towels or other disposable products. And but where's the balance? And that was the question. Yes, we were saving from gas and maybe electricity at work, but we were transferring it to the household, right? And if you're children, now you're feeding your children 3 times a day, right? You're getting extra school supplies. So, I mean, and I guess that's the debate, which is more effective.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that, just stopping the commuting has helped. And in fact, you can see overall, like if you saw those pictures during the real lockdown periods, like India, like there were flamingos that were coming back, like you could actually see Beijing, so absolutely, hey, like COVID has made a positive impact, in terms of, our carbon output. And the key is for us not to just jump right back in and just back to our old habits. It's really to reevaluate what things we can, pick out of this experience and to continue to really decrease our carbon footprint. And we're all in it together, if the fires of the last 3 years hasn't, told us and shown us that, like all of our efforts have to be made together to really, control like the warming of the earth.
No, that's very true. We're all in this together, and we have to do our part. And I think the more we learn about it, the more we learn about the resources and what we can do. Technology is obviously bridging the gap, on recycling and other products. And I mean, it's great that we have the innovation coming out. With that being said, if there's no more questions, and I'm just monitoring the chat here, but this was a fabulous discussion, and we really want to thank you for participating and enriching our program here. And I know the people that were able to join, hopefully that all of you have taken something away and evaluate, what you're doing and what your organization is doing. And like Connie said, if your organization does not have a program, start one up, start that conversation. That's how we could start that change process. And it's very key and important.